It's June the 12th, 1942, and inside the cockpit of a Bristol Beaufighter, Flight Lieutenant Alfred Ken Gatwood tightens his grip on the stick between his knees as he checks the controls for takeoff. Stuffed into the Beaufighter's claustrophobic rear seat, Sergeant Gilbert George Fern fidgets with his maps and fingers the damp collar pushing against his clammy neck. In the pilot's seat, feet firmly planted on the brakes, Gatwood orients the Beaufighter along the runway's center line and feathers the controls until at nearly 2,900 RPM, the twin Hercules engines are humming away at full throttle. Gazing east and noting the ominous cloud cover stretching to the horizon, he's startled by the crackling radio. It's command. They're cleared for takeoff. Slowly at first, but its speed increases steadily until just past 80 knots when it lifts into the air. When the plane has its legs, Gatwood makes a sweeping turn towards the channel, and once at altitude, eases back on the throttle to conserve fuel and allow the engines to cool. Despite heavy weather around Thorney Island and West Sussex, the twin-engine Bristol Beaufighter hurtles across the English Channel at nearly 300 miles per hour. The conditions are far from ideal, but this pair of friends have made a pact. Turning back isn't an option. As if by providence, sunlight bursts through the cockpit windows, jarring Gatwood from his daydream. Before long, they're over Rouen in northern France, then the suburbs of Paris. According to reports from the Special Operations Executive, Germans form up for a parade down the Champs-Élysées daily between 12:15 and 12:45. Such predictability in a time of war is either the height of lunacy or just demonstrating the aloofness of the occupiers. Strapped into a warbird and tasked with strafing Nazis, the audacious plan is so daring, the British have only sent one plane so as to limit the risk of loss and give a greater chance of completing the mission undetected. If there's a better way to while away a summer afternoon, Gatwood and Fern are unaware of it. Gatwood checks his altimeter and descends even further as cracks and muzzle flashes erupt below them. German anti-aircraft gunners are good, exceptionally good, and all that protects Gatwood and Fern from the hissing bullets and lethal artillery shells are thin sheets of aircraft aluminium and flimsy steel seats. Dead ahead, the Eiffel Tower appears like a beacon, and like a switch has been flipped, the ground fire disappears. Or perhaps it's only mercifully drowned out by the adrenaline coursing through the men's veins. The Beaufighter circles the tower and both men look in wonder at the famous landmark as the Parisians and Germans look back in equal wonder at why a lone Bristol Beaufighter is speeding in a tight bank around the tower in broad daylight. But mid-turn, Gatwood notices a small black mass coming right at them. He dips the starboard wing to avoid impact, but a bird slams into the Hercules engine with a resounding thud. It's bad. Losing oil pressure or engine compression at low altitude is usually fatal. Thankfully, after a splutter or two, the stout power plant shrugs off the impact and they continue onward. Flying low and fast, skimming over the Parisian rooftops, so low now that it rattles the buildings below. The buildings disappear and the Seine is there and then gone again in a flash. The Arc de Triomphe looms large ahead and to the right. It's their first target of the day. Gatwood flies past it and puts the plane into a hard right turn. Pulling hard, the men feel the G-force pushing them into their seats. Fern is ready though, and just as they pass, at the last moment, he releases his payload. It's away! The French tricolore flag flutters gently down in the wind, and to the immense joy of the locals, drapes itself over the Arc de Triomphe, the ultimate monument to French military victory. Now, appearing like a giant trench stretched ahead of them, is the Champs-Élysées. Gatwood descends below building height and into the trench for his attack run. Fern has time to snap off a few photos on the way. Powering low and fast, the Beaufighter streaks along the open boulevard, scaring the wits out of the locals taking their coffee and throwing up dust and paper in their wake. But to the surprise of Gatwood and Fern, the Champs-Élysées is exactly where it's supposed to be, but there are no Nazis and definitely no parade. Just short-sleeved Parisians enjoying a pleasant summer day, trying to forget the fact they are under German occupation. Approaching the end of the Champs-Élysées, Gatwood thinks, stay on target, and soon their second target is filling the view. At the end of the Champs-Élysées sits the Kriegsmarine headquarters. Lining up the shot and ignoring the remarkably close buildings all around, He presses the trigger, unloading a hail of cannon shells. He's on target. The Kriegsmarine HQ is blasted as cannon shells rip through its windows and masonry facade like they're made of French butter. Even the sentries turn tail and run in horror at the sight of the blistering Beaufighter bearing down upon them. The last run complete, Gatward pulls up. Fern, with perfect timing, lets loose a second French tricolore. Gatward and Fern allow themselves a moment of celebration at the offence they've caused to the German occupiers and the hope they've given to the French. The Germans are furious. Gatward and Fern land safely at RAF Northolt just before 1400 hours. Inspecting his plane for damage, Gatward finds a dead crow lodged near the starboard engine's cooler. As the only Allied casualty on that day, the French crow is laid to rest with all due reverence and honours. Most of our viewers aren't yet subscribers. If that's you, then please hit subscribe and help support the channel. Thank you.